morning, good afternoon, good evening. It never rains but pours. There is an Ebola virus outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so far, 140 people have died. There have been over 600 confirmed cases, and it is widely believed that the outbreak happened a number of weeks ago without being picked up. So it's possible that the number of people who have died and have been infected is much greater than that has come to light so far. This is a tragedy. We have to remember that the Democratic Republic of Congo potentially is one of the wealthiest countries in the world in terms of its potential and its natural resources. And yet that country and these people remains one of the poorest countries in the world. They've got a civil war going on, although in some cases people would say it's not quite a civil war because there are other nations who are involved, steering up the pot. And it has been raging on for years now. And there seems to be no end to it. This is really a serious tragedy. Welcome to the program, Ben.
Good day to you and good day to our viewers. Thank you for joining us. You know, one can just imagine the current situation of the healthcare system in DRC, given that they are constantly fighting and this fight seems to have no end, and it's been there for a number of years now. I'm sure it must have a big toll on the health system, and you got to look at even the national budget for a country that is fighting a war. And like you said, it's no longer just a civil war. It is now believed that there are other countries that are also involved in the whole setup. It's really, really sad. And another thing that is important to note is that health experts have been saying that the virus, the Ebola, virus itself is of a different constraint to the one that they actually know about, which now becomes very, very difficult to manage and to treat. It's really, really a dark place right now in DRC.
Well, here is somebody from BBC reporting on the situation of the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
You've probably seen the headlines. The World Health Organization has declared the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda a global health emergency. But here's the question. Why does it feel like the DRC keeps facing outbreak after outbreak? Let's break this down. Think of the DRC like a giant crossroads in the middle of Africa. The country borders 9 other countries, meaning diseases can spread across communities and borders and fast. These borders are very busy, with people constantly moving for trade and daily life. But when disease outbreaks happen, that movement can also help infections spread more quickly. But there's another factor: conflicts. Parts of the DRC have faced years of violence. Millions of people have been displaced, with many living in temporary camps or moving from place to place. These informal living conditions and rapid movement creates the perfect environment for infectious diseases like Ebola to spread quickly. The country's health system is also fragile. Conflicts has damaged some clinics, health workers are overstretched, and tracking outbreaks is now difficult. Symptoms of diseases like Ebola, Mpox, and malaria can look similar. This makes them harder to identify and control, especially in a health system that is already under pressure. In addition to all this, DRC is home to massive forests and extraordinary biodiversity. Experts say close contacts between people and wildlife can increase the chances of diseases jumping and spreading. But the risk goes beyond just contact with wild animals. In many parts of the country, bushmeat is an important source of food, increasing the chances of diseases spreading from animals to humans. So, yes, it can feel like DR Congo is always facing disease outbreaks. It's a mix of factors: conflicts, displacement, and fragile health system, constant movement of people, and geography. All of this helps explain why the DRC remains vulnerable to repeated outbreaks. It also explains why health officials are closely monitoring this rare species of Ebola outbreak, which currently has no approved drugs or vaccines.
That is another tragedy. According to the World Health Organization, they say that it may take as much as 9 months before a vaccine and treatment is finally approved. And in that 9 months, you have to hold your breath. This is the tragedy of Africa. We have been talking here on this platform on a number of occasions about Zimbabwe being a failed state. Well, DRC is another failed state. DRC have everything except competent leaders. Ever since its independence, that nation has blundered from one crisis to another. And there seems to be no end to it. And one of the things one has got to emphasize here is that the legacy of corrupt leaders like Mobutu Sese Seko still haunts that country. You allow the country to sink to the depths of destitute, as the DRC has done under Mobutu Sese Seko. Recovering becomes a serious problem. And it is in that vein that I would like to emphasize why Zimbabweans must take the problem, our situation, with a sense of urgency and seriousness the matter demands. Zimbabwe has been sliding into this economic and political mess we are in ever since the country's independence in 1980. And right now, the passing of this Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 will only drag us even deeper into that crisis. The root cause of Zimbabwe's economic collapse and political paralysis is the failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections. We have leaders who believe they have the divine right to rule the country, and they have ruled it with an iron fist. And the Constitutional Amendment Bill is them reaching out for even more dictatorial powers. This whole argument that Mnangagwa needs to stay in office another 2 additional years over and above the 10 years he has already been in State House as president is the most pathetic argument you could ever have. Are you saying that he is the only one who can deliver the country? Why has he failed to make any significant changes in the country's economic well-being these last 8 years he's been in power? This is just another way of Mnangagwa overreaching himself. He wants more dictatorial powers. He believes he is the only one who has got the answer to everything. The problem is he doesn't. This is just a manifestation of our failure to rule ourselves, of leaders who believe they are Mr. Know-it-all, of leaders who believe they and they alone have the right to rule. We've talked of corruption. The Democratic Republic of Congo is one of the most corrupt countries you can think of. The endless civil war is fighting over resources, which are then looted. And to be quite honest, Mnangagwa has been to the DRC. Zimbabwe has been involved in the DRC's conflicts. And Mnangagwa himself personally was named by the UN report that said he was one of the Zimbabweans who was involved in the looting of DRC's resources. This is the reality with Zimbabwe. We are seeing the writing on the wall. What is happening in the DRC can easily replicate itself in our own country. Zimbabwe is already a failed state. Ben was talking about our health system having collapsed. They have collapsed. Our nurses and doctors have left the country to seek better wages because the regime is failing to pay them. If there should be, as we speak right now, a case of a Zimbabwean or somebody who has come to Zimbabwe and has got Ebola, it could take weeks, if not months, before it is realized that there is a problem. Because even our big hospitals like Parenyatwa do not have the facilities to properly test those people. Decades of poor investment have reduced those institutions to dysfunctional positions. That is the reality, and we should be worried about those things.
We have often spoken about, how Africa is faring in terms of well-being, development, and we have since realized that most African countries or states are failed nations. Where you are seeing healthy functioning democracies are building infrastructure for their people. They are already so advanced, they're sending, people to space and creating, wonderful things for their own countries. Countries like Zimbabwe, DRC, and a lot, Uganda, they are stuck in what you could term, the Iron Age or Stone Age, if I may say. This is where you find, we don't have to go far. We look at the COVID outbreak, how COVID was handled in Africa. We had no plan. Our healthcare facilities were so stressed before the pandemic even hit. And when the pandemic hit, it showed that the cracks are as big as the doors, you know. And the disappointing part is we still haven't learned anything, you know. I'll give you an example of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's healthcare system is so dilapidated that our women folk are having to travel to South Africa to give birth because there is electricity there. There are materials that they will need to to safely deliver. And then you wonder, a country that everybody in ZANU-PF seems to be singing praise that Mnangagwa has done marvelous, and your healthcare system is so broken that even, you're talking about the nurses and doctors that have left. Those that have stayed are on strike, and they are now getting given hampers for survival. That just shows that, one has to be mental, loco, and crazy to actually be singing praise that somebody deserves, another term, extension because they have done marvelous. What is marvelous? Describe marvelous when you talk of Zimbabwe. Show me the marvel. Absolutely nothing. It is just a way, and we have seen with a lot of African, countries where dictators have always wanted to stay longer than they were supposed to. And they have brought nothing but misery for their, for their country and their citizens. It is unfortunate that, the poor people will suffer. The ordinary person in the DRC who was just trying to go and trade from here and there to try and make ends meet for his or her own family will contract this, Ebola disease unintentional, but will not be able to find any health care in their country because some greedy individuals have decided to loot for themselves. And the world has termed DRC's diamonds as blood diamonds. That is very, very serious. When your own mineral is now labeled that it's got blood on your hands, that is very, very serious. And that is the case of DRC. People are getting murdered, people are getting killed each and every day. And now to top it off, the poor person in the DRC, the ordinary civilian in the DRC, will pay a price with their life and their livelihood. It's a very, very sad situation and a very, very sad development. We just hope that, you know, the World Health Organization can come up with a vaccine sooner rather than later.
My last remark on this issue will be to emphasize this problem of kicking the can down the road and failing to solve it when we have the opportunity to solve it. What is happening in the DRC with this Ebola outbreak is piling on top of existing problems. Like we said, there's a war going on in that part of the DRC, actually. The outbreak happened in the eastern part of the DRC. And that's where the fighting is taking place. So for people to go there to give assistance is going to be that more difficult because of the conflict that is taking place. But also, we cannot forget that at the present moment, the whole world is facing a serious economic threat as a result of the war between the US, Israel, and Iran. It has disrupted the economy, the world economy. And the poorest countries suffer the most because they don't have any reserves. The other day, there was an article reporting about the street protests in Kenya. People protesting the high prices of fuel. Kenya is a hub for that part of the world, that part of Africa. If they are having problems with fuel, that could also mean that anyone who wants to go to the DRC to help will find it difficult to get there. So the problems are piling on top of the other. This is why it is important for a nation like Zimbabwe to seriously look at the problems that we have, our failure to address our own political problems these last 46 years. Zimbabwe is a failed state, and yet it has got the potential to be the South Korea of Africa. It is in that context that we must think of these problems. What is happening in the DRC can easily be replicated in Zimbabwe. With the world as it is today moving so fast, it is easy to see how somebody who woke up in the DRC this morning could already be in Zimbabwe. He could go on to travel deep into the rural areas without anyone realizing that he has got the problem. We will only have ourselves to blame. If we should have, God forbid, such a scenario, because those are the things that nations should plan for. And in a country whose economy is already in total meltdown, we will not be able to do so. DRC, yes, it's economically and politically worse off than Zimbabwe. But we should never, ever think that it cannot happen in Zimbabwe. We are not that far behind the chaos, the economic, political chaos that has gripped DRC for decades. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good night.